Does he have enough? Is it long enough? He got it!
Welcome, Husker Nation, to Post Game Spread, presented by Hurrdat Sports.
His second interception on the season. Multiple flags come down on the return.
Breaking down the highs and lows of what we just witnessed from our beloved Cornhuskers.
5, touchdown Nebraska.
It's time to let it all out. Join the conversation on YouTube or Twitter at Hurrdat Sports, or live in person at the Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill.
I'm done. Let's go.
It's time for Post Game Spread.
Spread it on.
Welcome into the post-game spread here at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill. You can find us live on Twitter and YouTube. I'm Ravi Lulla. Andrew Rogers, my everyday co-host, with me as well.
Hey, it's great to see you on a Saturday.
I would say, yeah, it's a long time no see. It's been almost a full 20 or 36 hours at this point. Start to have Andrew Rogers withdrawals after a certain point.
You know what? You're the first to ever say that. So that's at least a win in my book today.
I'm sure your fiance feels differently. But it's not all good fun and games here at the Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill as Wisconsin beats Nebraska 24-17 in overtime. Nebraska's first overtime game since 2021 against Michigan State.
Still haven't scored
since 2014, which I believe is coincidentally the last time they won an overtime game. We're going on a solid decade now.
Do you need points to win?
It helps. It certainly helps. I want to start there with the decision at the end of the game to go for the field goal instead of going for the win. And we were sitting together watching the end of the game there, and you didn't hate the play call, and I understand that. I think it was influenced by what we saw happen last week, which is totally okay. But I'm looking at my mentions, and I'm looking on Twitter and stuff because I'm pretty vocal during games, and I appreciate the interactions with everybody. But you can't have it both ways, right? You can't be mad last week that they went for the touchdown and not just for the field goal to tie the game, and then be mad this week that they went for the field goal to tie the game. Yeah, I get one's at home, one's on the road, but you're also dealing with, in that situation last week, Chubba Purdy, who had taken basically no first-team snaps all week. This is a Chubba Purdy where he'd been practicing all week, he'd been playing pretty well, and had not turned the ball over. I'm not even going to count that last one because that's a fourth down in overtime. You're kind of just throwing the ball up because you have to.
You got to get to the first down marker.
Yeah, they essentially played turnover-free football the entire game. Now the penalties crept back up, which was a problem, but that play calling sequence at the end of the game, you didn't have a problem with it. I didn't have a problem with it either. I kind of would have liked them to try to get more plays off. Sure. I didn't love how conservative they were in terms of running the clock down, but I didn't mind the play calling. I was pro continuing to run the football, trying to get chunks like they were doing. They took the one shot to the end zone, and it was either, hey, he's open or it's out of bounds, which I was totally okay with. But I just want to start with, you can't have it both ways. You can't want the field goal last week and not want the field goal this week. You can be mad, you can be upset. I'm not happy about this, obviously, right? They played poorly in overtime. There was a lot of things they didn't do right that we're going to get to. But, I need you to have, a little bit of logical consistency with me. If you were mad about not taking the field goal last week, you can't be mad this week.
So, 100%. Yeah, that's one point hitting the nail on the head because the reason I posted that and my tweet got a lot of interaction when I put the unpopular opinion out there. It's easy to be mad again.
Yeah.
Because the result ended up the way it did.
Absolutely.
So I'm not taking that away. Also, the scores were different last week and this week. Last week, you take the 3 points, you have the lead. Maybe it's a little bit different on Maryland. This week, you take the 3 points to tie the game, you go into OT. Call it what you want. Call it scared to lose. I don't really care. The reason I don't hate the decision is because every time we've seen this team play too aggressive or play calling just wasn't all there. What was the result? The result was more than likely an interception, or it was some mistake holding on to the football.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to get too cute with play calling, and things just don't go your way. Plus, guys, let's just be frank. Was the result going to be any different than a field goal on that drive? I don't think so, because what did we see from the 9-minute mark in the first quarter up until that final drive? Nebraska was hardly moving the football.
Not a lot.
It was a lot of Brian Buschini punts that went about 19 yards, and it was a one missed field goal by Tristan Alvano, which ended up being costly in the end.
Yeah.
But I'm not putting the blame there. I'm not putting the blame on the offense not moving the ball. This is just what Nebraska football is. Nebraska football is chunk plays. Yeah. They win games. They score points on chunk plays. Chubba Purdy's how long of a run to open up that game?
Yeah, it was almost 60, I think.
Jalen Lloyd's
55.
how long of a catch?
58.
They score points on chunk plays.
And that's been all year. So
getting into territory, whether it's red zone territory or field goal territory, was the result going to be any different than a field goal, whether they ran 3 or 4 more plays or they managed the clock the way they did? I'm not saying they managed it well.
Yeah.
And I think everybody out there can agree. Coach Rule, I guarantee, gets to the podium in the next 10 minutes and says, we didn't manage that clock very well.
Or he has got
a good reason as to why he managed it the way that he did.
And you might just disagree with it, but either he's going to own the fact that they didn't do it well, or he's going to have a reasonable explanation, even if you don't like it.
But this just doesn't seem like anything would be different. And now you can say, well, we'll never know. Right. You know what? We'll never know. But we also don't know if Chubba would have thrown a pick in the end zone.
Yeah.
And then you would have been even more mad whether you were sitting in the Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill or on your couch at home. You would have been just as mad if Chubba didn't extend that game or if Nebraska didn't go for the field goal.
Probably more mad, frankly. Like if there had been a turnover in regulation that kept Nebraska from kicking a tying field goal, I think people would have been more angry. I think. And listen, I understand that last week the field goal would have put you ahead of Maryland. Obviously, Maryland ends up going down and getting their field goal right after that. But, so I get the circumstances are a little different. But it's the logical consistency of saying, hey, I wanted him to be more conservative there and take the points versus, I wanted them to be more aggressive and go for the win. Like, I would have been okay if they went for the win. I really would have. But you're right. If they had thrown an interception there, or if they had fumbled, or if they had done whatever, people would have lost their minds in a way that, like, this is kind of a gut punch. It's like it goes to overtime and Nebraska goes up 14-0. And then, they let the game kind of seep away from them. So it doesn't feel good, right? But it also doesn't feel like somebody slashed your tires when you go out to work in the morning and you're like, what's happening here, right? It doesn't feel like that because Nebraska put themselves in positions to still have an opportunity to win. And obviously they didn't execute. They didn't get it done on defense to start overtime. They didn't get it done on offense to end overtime. And that's something that's worth discussing. But I find it really frustrating sometimes. And I do it too. I'm not pinning blame on anybody else. But it's frustrating sometimes to play the results, right? Like the trick play early in the game from Satterfield, right? It's easy to play the result for that. I didn't like the play call for what it was, even if it had been
a touchdown
because the guy was Coleman was wide open, right? Even if they had gotten the extra block they needed and gotten that pass off, I don't love the decision to do it in that spot. You're up 7-0.
I just don't love Nebraska playing cute.
That's what I mean.
They don't have the talent around them,
especially at that time when
play cute.
Both the pass and run were actually working. It's like, hey, that almost never happens. Why don't we just keep doing that stuff for now? And then if it doesn't work, you save the gadgets for a little bit later when you might need it.
Yeah, pull the car over to the shoulder right here real fast before you get on your point. Remember the last time they ran a play just like that? It worked. It was a touchdown. It was in week 1. But
it was also a bounce pass.
It was a bounce pass over to Jeff Sims, and he was able to corral it and throw a touchdown. So it's not like it was effective, right? It didn't work flawlessly when they first tried it. Just like in this moment where it was well read by the defense. You know how easily that could have been a quarterback gets hit on that as he's getting the ball. He fumbles, and it gets picked up for 6.
Yeah, they're lucky it was not a lot
worse. Could be a scoop and score, right? So I understand what you're saying there. Go ahead.
Yeah, so my point is it's really dangerous is the wrong word, but it can be misleading to play the results because the results are not always what happened with the best line of thinking. You have outliers that happen. You have things that happen with the way that a game plays out because of fluky things or whatever, where it's not necessarily it can kind of be fool's gold, right? If you're playing the results game, it can be fool's gold because you could be like, hey, look at that like the run with Purdy, right? Yeah, he broke off that big long run. That's awesome. It seemed like they maybe leaned a little bit too much into trying to let him run around and make plays after that. Mm-hmm. Like whether that was Satterfield or whether that was Purdy, right? And listen, I'm not here to really criticize Chuba Purdy because that was by far the best quarterback game Nebraska's had all year. If Nebraska gets that effort against Minnesota, Michigan State, and Maryland, they have 8 wins right now. So I'm not here to criticize Chuba.
And he's sliding up to QB1.
He's got to. Full stop, got to, right? And he's, by the way, still playing with a torn groin. But just for whatever that's worth. So I think that you can find fool's gold, though. I think maybe whether it's him, whether it's Satterfield, he ends up running 14 times and for over 100 yards. Was that one of the better parts of their offense? Sure. But is that something that you can do consistently and move the ball? I don't know, right? Mm-hmm. Emmett Johnson only ends up with 13 carries. Anthony Grant ended up with 12 for some reason. I don't know why him and Anthony Grant and Emmett Johnson keep ending up with about the same number of carries. Emmett Johnson's better. He's been better. I don't know why this is happening, right? So my point with that is just when you're playing the results game, you can get led into situations where you don't make the best decisions later on because instead of playing, it's what Coach Rule talks about all the time. You have to go based on the process, not based on the result, right? The result of this game wasn't what you wanted, but also the thing that you should be worried about or the thing you should be concerned about is the process, right? The defense didn't tackle really well at certain spots. They got to the quarterback a ton. I don't think they had a single sack in the game. That's a problem. They didn't tackle when Tanner Mordecai took off. They had 2 sacks. They had 2 sacks. They should have had half a dozen. They got to Tanner Mordecai.
Especially in overtime.
Yes.
You have a deep third down. You can't let him scramble nearly to the first down marker, which, at first glance seemed like a first down before they had to go for it.
Yeah, and they weren't able to bring down Tanner Mordecai. They made him look like Steve Young out there, like scrambling around and being elusive. Like, I don't know. Like, Tanner Mordecai has never been that dude. I don't know why he was today, but he was. And Nebraska got bit by it pretty hard. So there was a lot of things out there that were not process-wise what you wanted to see. Not just, hey, we didn't like the result. There were things out there that I didn't like the process of what was going on. I didn't like the fact that it seemed like every time Nebraska started to work themselves into a lather and get something going offensively, immediately they changed strategy. And that's been a problem with Satterfield all year. Every time they get something going, he changes it. Let the defense prove to you they can stop it before you stop for them. That's my biggest issue with Satterfield this year. It's not that he throws too much. It's not that he runs too much. It's not any of the other stuff. The cutesy stuff is annoying. It's that when something's working, he goes away from it before someone makes him go away from it.
It's why they tell pitchers all the time in baseball to start off with 2 pitches and not give up all 4 pitches or 3. It's however many you have. That's why you save your third pitch for the third inning when you're probably seeing the lineup go through again.
Through the second or third time through the lineup.
And then you maybe have one more pitch to go. That's why they say don't give away all of your things so that because if I'm a player, right, and I know that, okay, he's having great success with his fastball right now. Like he's finding his spots in the zone. He's picking me apart. He's probably going to stay with the fastball and not reintroduce something different until the fastball gets picked up on. Yeah. It's just like in football. If you're getting great success on the ground, say you're averaging 4 yards a carry. Well, I don't know if anybody knows basic math here, but if you do 4 yards 3 times, that tends to be a first down every single time.
Well, Nebraska was doing 5 for what it's worth.
And so that's where you're kind of going with that kind of talk. It's not just changing from run to pass, because that's just not always it. Sometimes it's just the look that it's presented with offensively on a 2nd and short or a 3rd and long. And also, the penalties were huge. You barely kind of touched on that at the beginning before we got into it. But how many times was Nebraska forced to go 3rd and 12 or 3rd and 15? It was too many times.
Well,
and you were forcing Chubba then to scramble more times than not because the pocket was collapsing so soon. And then, if there was any constructive criticism that I could provide to Chubba, it would be keep your head downfield. Because there were too many times where he stepped up and he's like, it's run or none, right? It's run or none. I'm either getting to the line of scrimmage and getting tackled, or I'm running and I'm scrambling for a first down, or I'm not getting it at all, right?
Which I agree with. I can live with that, honestly, because he did almost throw the 1 interception. I can live with that. If that's what he's been instructed to do, I can live with that. I would prefer him to keep his eyes down the field, because he definitely missed some guys that he could have had larger chunk plays. But even in the passing game, right? I thought he had some stuff going early with the quick precision passes out to Billy Kemp. He had some stuff going over the middle to Malachi and to Thomas Fedoni. And then, again, you kind of just go away from what's working. They started trying to take shots on corner plays and things to the sideline. And they can't seem to stick with the thing that's being successful. And that is the most frustrating part. That is, like I said, that is my one true complaint about Satterfield. And I'll pile some other stuff on too, but that's the thing at its core that bothers me the most about how he calls games is he refuses to make the defense stop what they're doing before he changes. It's that freaking offensive coordinator galaxy brain nonsense where it's like, oh, this has been successful twice now. I've got to do something else. No, you don't. You don't have to do something else until they make you do something else. Don't try and prove your salary. Don't try and prove your big brain. Prove your big brain with points. Prove your big brain with wins, okay? At the end of the day, that's all anybody cares about. Nobody cares except for you. Nobody cares about how it looks in terms of we've got really good concepts and look how well this play was designed. No one cares about that. Score points and win games. That's it. And until somebody stops you doing the things you're successful at, I'm looking at Emmett Johnson, who was running the ball well for a while. He only ends up at right around 4 yards a carry, but only got 13 carries in the game. Last week, 17 carries for 84 yards. He's been playing much better. All of a sudden, his carries get cut, especially with a 14-0 lead. Why on earth are you not making them prove that you can't get 4.9 yards a carry? Because that's the number. 40 carries, 195 yards, 4.9 yards a carry for the game. You go 5 yards a carry, you should win. And how many times have we seen that number? Right, like 4.8, 4.9, 5, 5.1, where Nebraska ends up losing the game because they refuse to stick to the thing that works. It drives me up the wall. And if Satterfield loses play calling or loses part of his title or whatever, they move on, which I don't think they will based on what Rule said, it'll be because of that. Not anything else. It'll be because he refuses to continue the thing that works.
It definitely needs to be improved. Where I kind of sit with everything, and I know sports fans tend to hold on to the one moment and stick with the one moment. And I'm not going to pretend that I've been a lifelong Husker fan for 40 years, 50 years, 80 years, 10 years even.
Sure.
Tom chimes in on YouTube saying, I'm officially done with Nebraska, tired of terrible play calling, which is what we just addressed there.
Frustrated with,
and clock management, which we started with. Born and raised, no more. And I just kind of want to remind people that this is year one of a new staff. They also have won 5 games.
Yeah.
And in any 5-7 season, if that's what it ends up being, I know it would be disappointing based on where they were at, but a 5-7 season's a good season for a coach, for a first-year coach put into any position. I don't care if they've stayed healthy all year or if they haven't in this case and have, compiled 5 wins. 5 wins is a very good first season. The other point I want to mention, progress has been made.
Yeah.
Especially in this game. As hard as this one is to take, and you have to take it on the chin, progress was made in this game. You found a quarterback that seems like your future, at least until the end of this year.
At least competent.
You found somebody and a team under at least the umbrella of tonight that didn't turn the ball over until it had to be turned over on the last play of the game because you're scrambling and hoping and praying for a first down. All of that being said, offensively, even with poor play calling at points, even with questionable time management down the stretch, progress has been made. There wasn't a point in time in this game where it seemed as though Nebraska was just handing the ticket over to Wisconsin and saying, here, you take my spot in line. No. At all points in this game, there was an ounce of hope. An ounce of...
And there were plenty of times where Wisconsin could have taken that hope. And the defense, who struggled today, I thought, stopped them on 4th down twice. They stopped them from extending the lead. They kept it to a point where they could go down and choose to take a field goal. So that goes to your point where there has been progress. There has been improvement. There's been lots of games in years past where the defense would have gotten themselves, they would have blown a 14-point lead and ended up losing by 14. There's been a ton of those games over the last 5 years. And listen, I know Nebraska fans get PTSD with the close losses, right? But listen, it's different when it's happening in year 4 with a bunch of guys that have been in the program for 3 and 4 years under a coach. And then when it happens in year 1 of a coach who tore everything to the ground and started over. Like, yeah, I get that there's some older guys on this team, but look at how many young guys are playing. Chubba Purdy is still only a sophomore technically and has not played very much college football. He's played at this point less college football than Heinrich Harburg has because of how many starts Harburg got during the season. So it is important to remember
it's year 1. It's a foundational year.
And let's not forget, they still have an opportunity on Friday to go make a bowl game.
Did you watch Iowa play today?
Yeah, they're not scoring 24 points.
They may not score 14.
There's not, right?
The reason Iowa wins games is the same reason Nebraska scores points. Iowa scores points via chunk plays and relying on their defense.
It's going to be another close game.
They were rubbing Brian Ferentz's head today in the game like he was their old pal Airbud that just scored the game-winning touchdown in a Disney movie. Is Airbud Disney? Maybe it's DreamWorks. Maybe it's some. It's in the Pee-wee football game. They were rubbing his head like he was a golden retriver.
Yeah, like he was a mascot.
Brian Ferentz didn't do anything in that game.
15 points.
And Illinois should have won that football game.
Absolutely.
There was no reason Illinois should have lost that football game.
I don't care what Iowa's record is. They are not. They're not that good.
And you have Iowa at home.
Yeah.
And look, I'll go back to where we started. People were saying you play for the tie at home, you play for the win on the road. Look, there's not one point in time where I don't want to give this team every opportunity to win. So that's why playing for the tie in this moment still gave them the opportunity to win. If they haven't gone to OT since 2021, and we talk about the close losses,
and they haven't,
those close losses are in regulation. Yeah. They're not always in OT. Look, one whistle changes that entire OT, possibly in Nebraska's direction, or at least extends it to a second OT. Braylon Allen trips. Who was it?
I think it was Heinrich.
No, it wasn't Heinrich. Was it Luke Reimer or was it Isaac Gifford? It was somebody rushing right up the gut.
Yeah, it was one of the linebackers coming right up the middle. It was either Reimer or Gifford, I think.
Whoever it was pounds Allen to the ground, who should never get pounded to the ground.
Rolled over him.
And
As Allen goes to the ground.
Legs up in the air.
Yeah, trips him.
Trips whoever it was.
Keeps Mordecai from
Mordecai scrambles and makes a play, right? Makes a play happen.
Mordecai was dead to rights if Braylon Allen doesn't trip him.
There's a point right there to where that could be the turning point.
Sure.
It's not the time management anymore, right?
No, right.
Now you may be talking about the trip, right? Or the no-call trip.
Yep.
Right? There are points in games that sports fans latch onto. Last year, March Madness, if you're in Omaha and you root for Creighton, and I know, on the post-game spread, Nebraska fans don't want to hear about Creighton, but Ryan Nemhard fouls an SDSU player from behind. A questionable call, right? That everybody ended up talking about, right? But there are other points in the game that Creighton could have won that basketball game. It's the same thing in this Nebraska game. You can be mad, you can pinpoint, you can ask to reassess, but how many other situations did Nebraska put themselves in to win this football game other than one going into halftime?
Yeah.
There was not one other time that Nebraska marched down that field.
A drive, yeah.
Other than going into half and kicking a 42-yard field goal that ended up missing, which technically, if you watch Tristan Albano a lot like I have, his field goal kicks go right to left. This one just didn't move left. And if you saw the one that he made going into OT, that one hardly moved too.
Yeah.
Like, it was pretty stale. It just kind of went dead straight. So I'm not going to sit here and say, I can't believe this or I can't believe that. What I am going to say, though, is going into Iowa, this – other than a win, is the best result I've seen from this team. Outside of a win, this gives me so much confidence going into a practice week, going into the final Black Friday game in a short week. This is a game you can build off of.
This is the first time this season after a loss, and even after some of the wins.
I'm not incredibly angry.
I'm bummed. But this is the first time after a loss and even after some of the wins where I haven't walked away saying our quarterback is actively sabotaging this team, right? I get there was the one interception technically, but he basically played a turnover-free game, right? I kind of look at that as, when NBA players will throw up a three-quarter court shot, and yes, that counts as an 0 for 1 from, or a missed field goal. I kind of look at the throw at the end of the game there as he had to throw it. Obviously he had been pretty good with his decision-making the rest of the game. He had that one interceptable ball on the sideline where the guy ended up being out of bounds, but he really took care of the football for the most part. And he did make plays, both with his feet and with his arm. If you can get anything close to the same performance against Iowa, I feel really good about Nebraska coming out with a win. Like I said, if you get this performance against Minnesota, if you get this performance against Michigan State, you get this performance against Maryland, those are all wins. And you obviously didn't get that because you were playing different quarterbacks, and that's fine. But you do have to take some of the positives away. And listen, that's with there being long stretches of this game where the offense didn't do much. You want to chalk that up to Chuba, that's fine. You want to chalk that up to Satterfield, that's fine. Obviously, they didn't execute well for a large stretch in the middle of the game there, outside of a couple drives. But that's way better than actively giving the ball to Wisconsin or Maryland or Michigan State or whoever in positions where they can score. This was a huge improvement in that area. Now, the defense didn't live up to their end of the bargain today the way they have for most of the year.
And I think that's another good thing to talk about right now, because this defense had every opportunity to get off the field on multiple occasions and didn't. And you know what? Credit to Phil Longo in Wisconsin. They were picking apart Nebraska's defense. They were finding holes in the zone, and they were finding different ways to get their receivers open in man-to-man coverage too. They did a great job of finding the spot, but Nebraska needs to do a better job of anticipating the spot.
So that's not even the part that bothered me, because they only had 160 yards passing. I can live with that.
Especially on third down, no, they definitely need to anticipate better.
On third down, they do have to anticipate better. But what bothered me, especially on the third downs, isn't that, okay, they hit Pauling. I mean, he had 8 receptions for 79 yards. I get that a lot of those were on third down. But even that, those aren't crazy numbers, right? For a game in a vacuum, I get situationally some of them were really big. But in a vacuum, hey, their best receiver is going to have 8 receptions for 79 yards. You can live with that.
Of course you can.
Right? Here's where I had a problem. Is they were totally unable to bring Tanner Mordecai down, and they allowed him to scramble and create plays for that team over and over. That's the adjustment that I that we didn't see that I wanted. Whether you leave a spy in there, whether you have just be like, hey, we've got to bring this guy down. They got a hand on him or flushed him out of the pocket over and over and over again, and we're totally unable to stop him. This is not a super mobile quarterback. This isn't even like a Hudson Card, Tagovailoa level of mobile quarterback. This is not what this guy does. And Nebraska allowed him to be super effective with his legs in a way that is really uncommon for him.
Well, I'll tell you what, though. I still think it goes back, even with Tanner Mordecai, to anticipating what you're going to see. Because Mordecai was playing with what on his right hand all day?
Yeah, he had a broken hand.
He's still recovering from a broken hand. Yeah. You saw him throw some ducks.
Especially early
on. So you know that he's going to end up scrambling once his pocket collapses. And I'm not saying you leave your defender, but you have to have somebody containing the quarterback.
Have a spy, something.
Somebody has to be there doing that. And that's another thing that goes into where I talk about anticipation. There needs to be anticipation of, hey, if Mordecai's in trouble, he's probably not releasing the football through the air on 3rd and 10. He's probably not. He's probably going to scramble and try to get some yards back.
Just for comparison, heading into the game today, he had, I believe this is not including today's stats, he had 59 carries for 186 yards, 3.2 yards a carry. He had...
Well, he's 9 of like 51
9
today.
for 51. That's 5.7 a pop today. So basically doubling his yards per carry. And
I'd love to know how many of those were on for 3rd down.
More than 25% of his total yearly yardage was added to today. So this is not something this guy normally does. The fact that Nebraska allowed him to do it, listen, 1 or 2, I get, right? But that they were so totally unable to adjust for the fact that he was willing to take off, that is really, really frustrating. And I hope that we get to hear from Tony White later this week about that, because that to me was the difference in the game. Tanner Mordecai kept plays alive, kept drives alive with his feet in a way that Nebraska was totally unprepared for. And listen, going into the game, I can understand being unprepared for it because, like I said, under 200 yards rushing the entire season, probably not expecting that to happen, right? But once you see it start happening, you have to be able to make an adjustment, and they were totally unable to do that because it happened all the way. We mentioned that 4th down all the way till the end of the game, right? That 4th down was in overtime. It happened all the way through the end of the game. From basically the first series till all the way till the end, they never made an adjustment with how Tanner Mordecai was beating them with his legs. And that was so frustrating because this is not one of those guys that should be able to do that.
And the other point, too, is coming into this game, Wisconsin's a house of horrors. Like, they get loud in there. It's a hard place to play. It's especially hard when the crowd noise starts to mess with a certain somebody's cadence, which is why Nebraska was penalized so heavily on the line today, just in false starts.
Yeah.
But when you go up 14-0 in this game and you suck the air out of that stadium, you have to be able to just stay steady.
To finish it, yeah.
Just to finish, right? Yeah. Just stay steady. I'm not saying you have to win by 14, but you have to be able to hold your lead. But the fact of the matter is, Nebraska allowed Wisconsin to come back in so many different ways in this game that by the 4th quarter, when they're jumping around, you're down by 3.
Yeah.
And that just can't happen. You can't win a lot of football games. You can't win a lot of sport games.
No.
By playing with that sort of approach of, hey, we got 14 points on them. They're playing pretty bad. Maybe we let off the gas. No, the gas pedal needs to just it's got to press down to the floorboard. You got to just keep driving on that team and making it hard. But I'll go back to the point that I started with. This team is so built on chunk plays right now that it's hard to put your foot on the gas and put it to the floor because you have to get lucky on chunk plays. Chunk plays, how many times do you get chunk plays in a football game? Maybe 5?
Yeah, I mean,
maybe like 5 good plays.
If you're a good offense,
right?
Yeah.
Maybe. Nebraska's not getting more than 2 a game. Fortunately for them, they both ended in touchdowns.
Yeah.
Most chunk plays don't. Most chunk plays are something that just gets you into scoring territory. But because they're so heavily built for scoring on chunk plays only, that's where I go back to. You have to find different ways to be able to do what Wisconsin did to you and pick somebody apart. I don't know where that goes or how that looks or how much that has to do with play calling or just the ability for these receivers to get open because of either the skill level that they're at right now, or they're just, not as talented as the guys that they're playing. I can't answer that question, but what I do know is you have to be able to extend drives. You have to be able to go better than a 5 of 12 on a third down, right? You have to be able to get to third down and execute. You got to at least do that over 50% of the time. You can't ever go below that bar. You can't dip too low because now at that point, where do you sit? You sit in a position to where, okay, now I'm trusting my defense again and again and again. And even though you scored 14 points, which is fantastic, it's still not enough to win a majority of football games. It's not.
So the thing that you're talking about goes back to what I was talking about with Satterfield not sticking with what's working. The way you step on their throat after it's 14-0, the part of the reason Nebraska hasn't been able to sustain drives is because of that point. Is because they refuse to stick to the thing that's working. That's why you see them get a couple first downs and then flame out because they're moving the ball, they're running the ball, they're doing whatever. They find some pass plays that they like that are working, and then all of a sudden, it's like Satterfield says, "Oh, we got to do something else now." That's why they can't sustain drives. Now, part of it is a skill level. Listen, they're dealing with super young receivers. They're dealing with without their top two running backs. Anthony Grant got banged up at one point today. Billy Kemp got banged up at one point today, although I think he came back. Like, you're dealing with two starters missing on offensive line. Like, I get that they're not going to consistently be able to sustain drives like they're one of the best offenses in the country. But when you find something that works, make them stop you for the love of God. Like, don't give them anything. You know what I mean? Like, quit.
I'm with you.
It's charity. Anytime something's working, especially the run game, because the run game only gets better the more you do it. That's the point of the run game, is to wear people down. Nebraska had 18 minutes time of possession in the first half. They ended with 31, right? So they basically flip-flopped time of possession first and second half. Because guess what happened in the second half with the Wisconsin? They started running the ball. Braylon Allen started to get going a little bit. And not even that much. I mean, Wisconsin ended up with less rushing yards, less yards per carry than Nebraska. I believe they were both exactly at 40 rushes. Nebraska averaged one more yard per carry than Wisconsin. 40 carries, 4.9 yards a carry. Wisconsin, 40 carries, 3.9 yards a carry. Nebraska should have been the team imposing their will at the end of the game. But if you don't consistently do that over the course of the game, you allow the other team to breathe. You have to put your foot on their chest and make it hard for them to breathe by continually pounding the rock and wearing that team down. Satterfield refuses to do that. Even if he gets to a respectable running number, he refuses to let that offensive line, who wasn't as good today as they were last week, but still has dramatically improved this year, he refuses to let them impose their will on a defense. And that's something they're actually capable of. I believe that. I really do, because I've seen too many games this year where they average 5 yards a freaking carry for that not to be a real thing. He refuses to let them impose their will, and that's why they can't sustain drives late in games, because the other team is still fresh enough, because they don't beat them up. You have to allow your offensive line and your fullbacks and your tight ends and your running backs to beat up the other defense so that when you get into deep waters, they don't want to fight anymore. And Nebraska's offense doesn't do that. They're capable of it, but they refuse to do that, and that's what I put on Satterfield.
So the last point that I'll bring up here, do you remember last week we gave our 3 keys to the game, right? And my 3 keys went a little bit like this. The first one was get Emmett Johnson 20-plus carries. Did that happen today?
It did not.
The second one was get or keep Wisconsin's running backs off the scoreboard. Did that happen today?
Nope, Braylon Allen had 2.
And how many touchdowns did they score today?
3.
And so having 66% of the touchdowns or
too many.
in points, too many for that key, right? So 0 for 2 on those first 2 keys. The last one was kick more field goals, okay, which they did today. And yes or no, if it gets criticized or not, that's fine or whatever. But I still think Nebraska needs to put Tristan in a position to where he kicks more in games.
Yeah, so he gets more comfortable, right?
If you look at one of the best kickers in all of college football history, and I'm going to go recent here. He didn't have a great NFL career, but his name is Roberto Aguayo.
I knew that's what you were going to say.
He
was incredible.
One of the best ACC kickers in history, if not the best.
One of the best college kickers in
history. Was a second-round pick when he got drafted. I'm not saying that any kicker should get taken that high, like Sebastian Janikowski, but you know what? do as you need to fill your roster if you're an NFL team. But let me read you his stats just from his freshman year, okay? So Roberto Aguayo played 14 games. He had 94 extra point attempts, made them all. 94. That means Florida State scored a ton to give him kicks, right?
94 touchdowns, yeah.
He had 22 field goals attempted. This is a team that scored that many touchdowns and still had 22 field goals attempted. Then you go over to Tristan. Tristan, so far this season, has been perfect on extra points too. But guess what? He hasn't kicked 94. He's kicked, well, take a guess. How many has he kicked this year?
30-ish.
24. So Tristan only has had in what, 11 games?
Yeah.
24 extra point attempts.
That's 70 fewer.
That's maybe 2 a game. Maybe.
Yeah.
Little over 2 a game.
Basically talking 2 a game and then a handful of field goals.
His field goal attempts, and it's not 22.
It's like 10.
Cut it in half. It's 11.
Yeah.
So he's kicked 11 field goals. And you know what? I don't know if this is fully updated.
Including today?
Because you know what? It's not. So he's kicked 13 field goals.
13 field goals.
He's 8 of 13.
Yeah. So he's 8 of 13 and he kicked 2 extra points today. So 26.
But when was he kicking field goals, right? So this kid warms up. He warms up at what time? Oh, yeah, before the game. That's why they call it warm-ups. His first field goal attempt was after...
Right before halftime.
It was after 24 minutes of gameplay? After he kicked his PAT? His second PAT at like the 9-minute mark?
Yeah.
So he's sitting on the bench, you know, kicking into the net every now and then for 24 minutes, watching this team drive and punt, drive and punt. At some point, I saw people on Twitter clamoring to see Tristan Alvano punt one, just so that they knew it'd go more than 20 yards. So he kicks his first field goal, then doesn't go well. It's fine. This guy goes into the locker room. You know, the first thing he does is he comes back out and he starts kicking field goals again, right? When was the next time he had his chance to kick a field goal?
Very end of the game.
Very end of the game. And he made it. 30 yards away. Most kickers should make the field goals that they come in for. Yeah. And I'm not saying that that's end all be all, but for development of him, this Nebraska team needs to even get their kicker more reps.
Yeah, he just hasn't got very many reps.
You got to give him more reps, just like how you got to give everybody else a chance.
Chuba needed more reps.
Chance to get down the field.
Yeah.
Like, give your team that opportunity. But too many times they're beating themselves.
Yeah.
And where to start with that? That's the $1 million question.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, and where I start with that, and again, this is kind of what I've been talking about the whole time. Where I start with that is stick with what you're good at. Stick with the things that you have been successful at. And yeah, you're going to try some other things at different points. I understand that. But the bread and butter of what you're trying to do needs to be the things that you know you're actually decent at. And for most of the year, that's been running the football. Nebraska, I mean, I'd have to look up the stats exactly for what Nebraska's been on the season running the football, but I bet it's over 4.5 yards a carry for the entire season. That's a good number. That's a number you can build an offense around, right? I mean, I'm going to look it up right now. This is a team. It's exactly 4.5 yards a carry for the entire season. 1,800 rushing yards. That's over 100. That's 180 a game, basically. You know, it's
pretty dang good.
That's good enough to build an offense around. And they've refused to do that for whatever reason. And listen, you're going to look at the run versus pass numbers and you'll be like, I mean, Ravi, they're running more than they pass. It's a different thing to just have the numbers in terms and when you actually do it and how you actually do it. They refuse, for whatever reason, to just lean all the way into that and let that be their thing. That's the difference to me of where you get a consistent effort, is when you lean all the way into the things you're good at. And Nebraska hasn't done that this year, whether it's been on offense, whether it's been on defense. They haven't been able to lean all the way into the things they're good at. And those numbers are through, those are through 10 games, because Chubb was only on here for the 33. So those numbers would even go up. It'll be a little bit better than 4.5 yards a carry. That's good enough to build an offense around. And Nebraska hasn't done it. That, to me, is the big issue, the big thing where they haven't necessarily always put this team, especially on offense, in positions to be successful. And so you look at it and you say, hey, that's why there's a lot of frustrating things on offense. And listen, especially today on defense, they needed to tackle way better. They needed to wrap up Tanner Mordecai way better. They needed to not allow him to beat them with their feet. They needed, there was a bunch of things that needed to be better, right? But one of the things that's been consistently poor throughout the season is what I'm talking about right here with the rushing offense and the game plan offensively. That, to me, is something that if they're going to beat Iowa, they have to change. They have to lean into that with Iowa. Because Iowa probably isn't going to give up the chunk plays. They're probably not going to give up those huge 40, 50, 60-yard touchdowns.
There's a better chance of it happening now with Cooper out, but still.
Sure, but that's why Iowa has 9 wins, is because they might not score and they might give up a little bit here and there, but they're not giving up huge plays for the most part. That's not what they do. So you're going to have to be able to sustain something against them. And the only thing Nebraska's shown that they can sustain at any point during the year is the run game. So they're going to have to make some adjustments this week, I think. I still think they can beat Iowa. Iowa doesn't scare me at all. I don't care what the record says. I don't care that they're 9-2. They don't scare me even a little bit. I've watched way too much of them this year. It's been bad for my,
mental health.
Not even that, because it's just been bad for my life. It's just bad football.
It's not good football.
But they win, right? And right now,
because they close.
Yeah, I would take that right now. I would definitely take bad football wins for Nebraska right now. And I would love to get one on Friday.
Right. And as we look toward that too, I'm not going to shy away from saying this or stray away from even saying this. Take the points. Stick with taking the points. When you have the opportunity to take points, take them. Don't try to force something. Don't try to get cute with play calling. Take your opportunities, but be as basic as the book tells you to be. You don't hit on a dealer 6 because you can, right? You play the book you play the stats the way that they should be. It goes into Ravi's point about running the football more.
Play the process, not the results.
We saw Iowa bat down plenty of balls at the line of scrimmage today. They're very good with their hands. It's going to be hard to throw against them. So having success on the ground is key. But the other one is taking the points when you have the opportunity, and that's why I wasn't mad about that down the stretch of the game against Wisconsin. We have a couple of comments that have come in. The first one was TK off the rip saying that he's got to put his phone away during the game. I think that goes back to maybe a text he sent me. And the second one is field goal last week gives you a 3-point lead, not tie the game. And I brought that up after you had said it.
Yeah, we addressed that later.
But still, again, it's a hypothetical, right? You're banking on, yes, him making the field goal. But what would a touchdown have done against an offense like Maryland who has a high-flying passing offense and can get down the field quick? That's why they were thinking touchdown in that moment. But I'm with you because I said take the field goal from the very beginning. I don't try to force and throw or run until you can't anymore. And you can be critical of clock management, but still, it's not about being mad about them tying the game. Because if Nebraska goes into OT today and wins, that comment right there doesn't exist.
Yeah, you have to play the process, not the results.
So, again, it goes back to avoiding those hypotheticals, but then looking ahead to Iowa, that's why I don't change the mindset. I know what this team is. Everybody out there knows what Nebraska is. Nebraska is a team that tends to clench up when things get tough right now, right? They find themselves in so many close games and moments like this because they haven't been able to execute throughout the first 3 quarters like they want to. So against Iowa, it's not about being cute. It's about literally going with what works for you.
Yeah. And that's what I want to see more from Nebraska.
Iowa knows what works for them,
Mm-hmm.
and that tends to end up in W's.
Mm-hmm.
If you go with what works for you, especially at home, there is no reason after a week of improvements, after a game that seemed like a drastic improvement, that you can't beat Iowa on a short week.
Yeah, I mean,
There's no reason that this team isn't capable of getting that 6th win and going to a bowl.
Nebraska needs to take a page out of Iowa's book and do the things they know they're good at and quit trying. It's the outsmarting, it's the whatever big galaxy brain offensive coordinator thing, whatever it is. And Satterfield's not alone. This happens with a lot of offensive coordinators. They need to take a page out of Iowa's book and do the things that work. And you can save the cute stuff for the offseason, right? Figure it out then when you've got healthy, when you've got new guys, when you've got whatever, when you've got the guys with more experience. But for one game to get bowl eligible, do what works, not what you think makes you look like a smart offensive coordinator. We'll let you go there today. That is all for the post-game spread. You can catch Andrew and I Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday this week.
We'll continue these thoughts.
Before the holiday. We will be off Thursday and Friday, but then we'll be back next week, the week after that, Thanksgiving as well. Appreciate you joining us on YouTube and Twitter on the post-game spread. I'm Ravi Lulla. That's Andrew Rogers. We'll talk to you next week.